I'm going to talk a little bit about leveraging connected data for predictive cost and planning outcomes. It's more about leveraging connected data, and I will spin through this, and we'll take questions, I think, as a group later when all the presentations are done. So if you have any questions, write them down. But as Mary says, my name is Ross Griffin, founder of Kosmos and Fifth Dimension. I won't go into too much detail. A little bit on Kosmos. We use this for all our introductory slides. We're a digital cost and carbon quantity surveying consultancy. We have offices in Ireland and Copenhagen. Copenhagen is our head office. And we have projects and clients around the world where we deliver kind of digital cost and carbon consultancy. What we've done today is use a bit of a case study on a project that we have delivered a year ago, and I think it's mainly relevant today because it's about connected data and viewing cost management as data management rather than traditional kind of quantity surveying. But let me just introduce the project. We talk a little bit about the delivery strategy on the project, a little bit about the integrated process, because I think it's key if we want to talk about automation and AI in the future. I think we have a lot of work to do before we get as far as that in terms of that integrated process and standardization. And we talk a little bit about the results. But let me jump straight into a slide we use in every single one of our presentations, and it's value-driven cost and carbon management. We believe it's an integrated, collaborative approach to designing to cost and carbon, as well as continuous cost and carbon follow-up. We're trying to change the dynamicism between the stakeholder groups on projects, so that we become more collaborative and integrated. So we talk about information exchange, etc., with our stakeholder partners like architects, engineers, and so on. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges for us as QS, is this shift in mindset towards a more collaborative, integrated approach. But let me jump straight into the project. Some key figures here. Total gross floor area about 160,000 square metres. We had about 26 buildings, 156 unfederated models. I'll talk a little bit about that a while. 750,000 square metre plot, and 10 different stakeholder groups involved in this particular campus project. To give you an idea of sizes, we had about 3 to 4 buildings above 20,000 square metres. There's about 10 of the buildings that are above 5,000 square metres. So there's quite significant buildings within this project. And in order for us to be able to deliver what is necessary, we needed to establish a strategy at the beginning of the project for commercial, which is cost, carbon, risk, all of the above, in order to be able to communicate what our approach to the project would be with the other stakeholders. It's not business as usual. This isn't business as usual. It can't be business as usual. It has to be a new approach to project delivery. So we developed the Kosmos roadmap. Some of this stuff is very basic, but nevertheless, it's not about reinventing the wheel here. It's about understanding what each stakeholder group delivers and how we can then leverage that information. Quite simple here, and some of our clients actually wouldn't be the most educated when it comes to this, and really what we're on is a journey of education with them, as well as the other stakeholder groups. So identifying some deliverables, identifying meetings, just be clear and clarity on the communication with the stakeholder group. So at the beginning of the project, we kicked this off as, what's the commercial strategy? What's your involvement as an architect? What's your involvement as an engineer? What's your involvement as a client? What do I expect from you in terms of that information exchange? And we get into quite a lot of detail then when it comes down to the information exchange, understanding what we would expect at the different stages from the design groups in terms of that level of development or level of detail. For QSs, it's key for us. What are we expecting at each of the design stages? What's going to be excluded and missing from the design at that stage? We need to include it in our commercials. We need to include it in our carbon calculations. We can't just price what's in front of us, as we all know. We all know this in this room. Otherwise, there's big gaps. So the BIM execution plan becomes key. And I think, Jason, you'll probably speak about this later anyway, no doubt. The BIM execution plan becomes key to us as QSs. Now, I'd be interested to know how many of you guys in the room as QSs get involved in the BIM execution plan development in your organisations on your projects. Right now, we seem to be excluded from that for some reason. But we need to understand 5D, we need to understand 6D. What is our level of information need? What are we going to be producing at the different design stages? What's the standards we're going to use, etc., etc. That's building information management, or building information modelling, we need to be included in that as QSs because we produce information. So we produce a guide called the 5D Requirements for Project Material, and this is to share, to sit down at the kick-off with the different stakeholder groups to understand what it is that we need from the design teams. How are we going to exchange our information with them, because we will share our information with the design teams, our cost plans, our estimates, the BOQs, etc., etc. It also describes, again, the level of information and the accuracy of that information, the quality as we talk about it, and more importantly, what's not included in the design information at the different stages. So we have a bunch of, I would say, different documents here, and we describe it in quite a bit of detail, so it is clear. This form is then part of an appendix to the BIM execution plan that kind of supports us as QSs and services our needs. So from the modelling perspective then, and this isn't legible, but just to give you an impression of what this matrix looks like, it's an appendix to the BIM execution plan to identify components, the building elements or the assemblies within the models, and what the information need from us is as QSs. What will we be taking off from the model? What will be 2D measurement? Ideally, the majority of quantum should be coming from the model, again, depending on the stage of the project that you're in. And custom parameters that we need for takeoff, exported within IFC. Also, it's always a conversation on projects. Examples of what this information looks like is key for the architects and engineers, because they're not used to dealing with this in reality. Their idea of quantum takeoff is vastly different to our idea of quantum takeoff. So this, again, is a bit of transparency. And of course, who's delivering what and when along the project life cycle. Very simple document, but it offers us so much value to the project. And again, leveraging data. What we want to do is get as much information from what the architects, the engineers, and the other stakeholders produce. We don't want to sit down and reinvent that information again in a manual process. So the challenge, as I mentioned, 26 buildings, and from a QS perspective, we would expect that we would have an estimate and a cost plan per building. So we have IFC models, unfederated, meaning that they're individual models for the different disciplines. Reason being is that the federated models are just too big. Our costing systems like Cost Execute can't deal with it. We can't process it. So unfederated. That also means that we have different people managing the different federated models within the tools that we use. We then looked at, okay, how are we going to manage 26 buildings? Are we going to have to estimate 26 individual buildings and have 26 cost plans? So the amount of time that would take and the team that we would need to do that would be too big. It would delay the project. So we looked at a master file in an ICMS structure. That master file allowed us then to split the buildings into zones. That means the output from the master file is 26 building outputs. We're pricing one project. And that has a significant impact on time and the amount of resource needed in order to be able to deliver such a project. Again, we're leveraging data, and each component is mapped to the priceable item within our ICMS structure, meaning that we can update quite quickly, assuming that the design information doesn't change. So the commercial management strategy for us allowed us to have 26 different buildings priced, 26 estimates, external works, preliminaries, preambles, risks, in total about 30-something documents here that were supplied to the supply chain for pricing. And what's interesting about it, and we'll go into it, is, well, how long did that take us to do? So we keep going here with the amount of documents we need to produce for our client, but this needs to be done efficiently. And all of these are standardized. It's ICMS and NRM. That's what we've used in this particular project. But in order to get that, as we mentioned, we have a lot of communication need with the different disciplines. BIM execution plan becomes a tool, but it's your responsibility or our responsibility to communicate our need to the other disciplines. This means that we have a collaborative approach where we design together, we cost together, we manage change together as a stakeholder group for the project. It becomes project orientated, not necessarily discipline. And that integrated approach means that we are sitting down having individual conversations with each discipline. It's not in the design meeting where you have the conversations about cost. You need to take it to a granular level with the different disciplines in order to be able to really connect with them and to build that relationship. And so our integrated approach is quite interesting. I would say that traditionally the QSs sit at the end of the design process. They usually sit at that gateway, take all the design material, prepare their estimates, go back and say we're 10%, 15%, 20% over budget, and all the design queries that have to go back with it. So we're stalling the process in reality with this traditional model we have. We really need to be integrated so that we are challenging information as it's being produced along the project life cycles. This improves quality, reduces risk, reduces time for redesign, and also reduces the time for us to prepare our documentation. And in that sense, everybody's a winner. So this integrated approach becomes key. And then we focus on the data management piece rather than the cost estimation, using standard rate libraries that we've developed internally, that along with our data model template, which is that master file, and then linking all of that within our costing system gives us this automated kind of estimate result. And so once we get our new models on a monthly basis, or fortnightly basis, or weekly basis, we can update these estimates and keep it in real time, quote unquote real time for our clients. So the result here is we take a manual process, traditional cost estimation, we standardize it using ICMS, we digitize it using our systems. For example, we use Costex, and then we begin to automate certain quantum update. So we're not remeasuring foundation type 1 56 times throughout the entire project lifecycle. We're mapping it to the information in the model, and we're qualifying that information. Again, leveraging the data that's available to us on the project. So with the master file, we had about 6,000 priceable items versus 120,000 priceable items. So 6,000 priceable items on a master file rather than 6,000 per 26 buildings. So it changes dramatically the level of work that we need to do as QSs on the project. We produced 26 plus documents. We had about 5 QSs at the peak of production, but actually during the project life cycle, during the design stages, we had 2.5. It's a vastly reduced team, dramatically reduced here. 156 unfederated models, as we mentioned, and I'll talk a little bit about the time now to produce an estimate on 160,000 square metre, 126 building project. So we approached the project in this kind of view of leveraging data. It took us approximately 2 weeks for an estimate on the concept design. Again, this is circa €1 billion project. It's quite large. So 2 weeks with the team, as I say, that we had 4 to 5 QSs, 3 weeks for schematic, and to produce the detailed estimate and BOQ and tender estimate about 4 weeks. Traditionally, it would look something like this if we were to do this manually. Speaking to our client on previous projects, this is what they were telling us that the previous consultant were offering. So we're able to reduce the amount of time dramatically for the project, but also for ourselves on it. So this does not only save time, design and cost, but it also results in better quality design material. And what I mean by that is that because you're using the information produced by others, you're qualifying it in your workflow. You're asking the questions about why this is telling you this in the specification and this in the model and this on the drawings. They're not the same. We need to verify all that. That's traditionally what the QS would do anyway. But what we're doing is, because it's coming from the model, we're leveraging that data. So when we exchange that information to the contractor, it's already qualified. That risk of poor information and ambiguity is removed from the project. Also, because we're doing it along the project life cycle within the design in a collaborative way, it means we're not under pressure at the back end trying to produce the estimates while qualifying the information, while creating the RFIs, while trying to communicate with the design team that are now under pressure and actually has moved on to the next stage of the design. So it becomes a much more fluid process. But how do we get there? So we standardize, we digitize. That's the focus on it. So the manual process, we standardize that. We use, as you all know in this room, ICMS international, and we use ICMS not just for reporting. I know it's a reporting, but actually we use it as our standard for all our cost estimates, our BOQs, everything. So we're not mapping our BOQ back into ICMS to report. This becomes the basis of our structure. We digitize. We use Costex, but then we also use the fifth dimension as our analytical tool with our clients, where we can upload our estimates along the project lifecycle and analyze them. And then we begin to automate this. And this is where real leveraging of the information. We're talking about AI. If we can standardise all our projects, digitise all of it, we can begin to really leverage AI in the future in terms of prediction. So we increase quality, let me go back there. Quality, accuracy and clarity, that communication piece with the clients. And I think the quality piece is the real value add in reality. It's that challenging of information before it goes to the marketplace, giving us enough time to make sure that what the other stakeholders and other partners are producing is a good enough quality that we've reduced ambiguity so that we can contract with the contractors in a way that their risk is reduced dramatically. That's what the real value is, because we want to get to an execution stage where we have very little change. We don't want teams of QSs in the execution managing change and claims and all that. We want to get to an execution piece where it's easy to deliver, very little change, very little impact. And of course this is dependent on the procurement strategy and the sub-industry that we're involved in, etc., etc. But nevertheless, there's a huge value in this. Accuracy of information, of course, and clarity in our communication to our clients, but also clarity in the communication to the other stakeholder groups. Like for you guys as QSs, how many of you share your estimates with the architects, with the engineers? How many of you share the BOQ with them so that they can qualify your work? We're qualifying their work. Why shouldn't they qualify our work? They know their project best. We're only coming in, taking their information and restructuring it. So that part becomes a real powerful, I think, on projects, and it builds the trust and builds a relationship that maybe we don't have traditionally. Because if we're always going in telling them there's a problem, no one's going to like that in reality. So we need to be able to that collaborative piece, I would say. So there's an opportunity here, we would argue. So the way we look at it is, if we can standardise the projects, all of them, we can standardise the typologies and portfolios, it means that we can then leverage this data for our clients across all of their investments. I know I put the LDA and the OPW and Limerick City and County Council here, but it can be private and public, it doesn't matter. And every project should be approached with the same principle. Standardisation, information, it doesn't matter if it's $1 million or if it's $1 billion investment. The principles should be the same. And if we can get this piece across to our clients, I think we have a huge value to be added here, especially, as I mentioned earlier on, in leveraging this data in the future with AI, predictive costings, predictive risk analysis, all of this stuff when we get into kind of the AI deliverables. Just watching my time there, 17 minutes. Okay, great. So I have a couple of more slides here. So the conclusion for us. Just let me check something. To leverage data created by other stakeholders, you need an integrated collaborative process, and it's really about leveraging that data. We have this saying, that if we're manually measuring a foundation at concept design stage, it means we need to check that measurement again at each gateway along the project life cycle up to detailed design. We then need to check that foundation again through the execution process, and we need to check it again at final account. It means we're measuring that same foundation type 6, 7, 8, 9, 15 times. How many man hours are we wasting on a project remeasuring the same foundation? I'm only talking about one foundation. Now think about all the components within the project that we need to measure in order to verify economy. So we can leverage the data within models to be able to automate that so that we can actually do stuff that creates real value as opposed to administration. And this is a difficult one because it's really for the clients. The QS and cost manager need to be involved from the very beginning. As I mentioned, the BIM execution plan becomes key. Implementing your requirements in the BIM execution plan is vital. In order to be able to do that, you need to be there at the beginning. In order to be able to implement the commercial strategy, you need to be there at the beginning. Coming in at the end of the concept design stage to do an estimate is useless. It's useless to clients. You do the estimate, you tell them the value and away you go. Next day the project has changed and it's irrelevant. I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have as our discipline is convincing clients that there's value in that. Regular communication is key, as we said, sitting down with each discipline lead, and we do it on a weekly basis, fortnightly basis, right through the entire project life cycle. It becomes hugely valuable. We're able to do that because we're not spending hours and hours and hours manually measuring. We have the time now. We're able to reinvest that elsewhere in more value creative processes, I would say. And do not wait to the end of the design. We know this. The amount of times that we've created estimates at the end of the design delivery and it's 15-20% over budget, and we're trying to communicate with design teams that are under pressure, it becomes super difficult. Parallel walking is the only way we can achieve this. And I would say the process, the structure, and the value need to be understood from the very beginning, as I mentioned. The process is key, structure of information is vital, and the value of what you're trying to do needs to be communicated with the design teams, with the clients, with all the other stakeholders, because you know yourself best, but you need to communicate that with everybody else. And I will always say, you can always reach out to people, including ourselves. Follow us on LinkedIn, I think it becomes, to be able to talk about the challenges we have in the industry allows us to feed off each other and to educate each other. And it's great to hear people having the same problems as you and then finding someone that actually has a solution to that issue. It just makes life so much easier. So I would say absolutely use the network here today and let's leverage data. Is that what we're trying to say, Mary, I guess,
Leverage data.
21 minutes. I did it.